Everybody for joining us today for this meeting is being recorded. I'm sure you heard that all. So we'll be able to send you a link to the recording as well as this presentation deck at the conclusion. Thank you for joining us for this 2023 State of the Nonprofit Industry Lunch and Learn. And depending on what time zone you're in, could be a late lunch and learn or a snack and learn. We've got a couple of time zones represented on here in the United Way system across the country. My name is Greg Werb with DonorPoint out of Cleveland, Ohio. And what we hope to do today is to show you a little bit of insight that maybe you haven't seen previously in the world of nonprofits. Talk about donation conversion, maybe how your donation conversion stacks up to the nonprofit industry standard trending. What we can learn from best practices from e-commerce websites, you know, the Amazons, the eBays, the Targets, the Walmarts that you as shoppers with your shopping hat on visit every day. The key to successful online engagement and making those e-commerce strengths that we just talked about, and we'll talk about that a little more in depth, work for you to optimize your donations for your nonprofits. Okay, first thing we want to do is take a look and show you what the nonprofit landscape currently looks like. Again, hope to give you some insights that maybe you have not seen before. This is a shot of total charitable giving. You can see from 20 to 2021, it's been essentially flat. However, while total giving has remained relatively flat, the entire population of charitable donors households, and that's US households donating anything, is downtrending. As you can see in the first bullet point, in the year 2000, 66% of US households donated something to charity. In 2018, that's gone from 66% down to 50%. So you're getting the same amount of money for the last couple of years, but fewer households are donating. And we'll talk about maybe as we break that down into household income levels, which groups are lagging behind and which ones are kind of picking up the slack for that. Okay, so we can see here that the wealthy are driving the giving. Okay, according to a 2022 survey by the RKD group, you can see that year over year in 2021, household incomes up from $0 to $30,000, their giving is down 49% versus previous year. That's the lower. The middle class, 30 to 100, is down 19%. And the 100 to 500,000 are down 28%. So again, really the takeaway from this, as I'd stated before, we're looking at fewer total donors that are making up for this. And you can see obviously the 500,000 to the 1.5 is up significantly. And a good thing that it is, because the lower income brackets are struggling a little bit to maintain that giving level that they once had. We'll talk about maybe some of the reasons why in a little bit. And you may find that in your United Way agencies that you may be seeing the same thing. And some donors that are on the lower end of the income spectrum might be a little more of a struggle in the last couple of years. Okay, now we talk about giving to certain areas of need. What you probably saw in your agencies, and many United Way agencies did nationwide, is that when COVID came, donations to critical needs, and when we say that, we obviously mean food, shelter, healthcare, clothing, those kind of things, typically upticked as far as giving to certain areas of need. You can see public society giving 2021 versus previous year was up 24%. Environment and animals up 11, health up 8, human services up 2%. Obviously, this may come at the expense of other areas of need, if you will, where they may take the focus off of areas that certain donors may not deem as critical as those things when there is a critical need for when a pandemic like COVID hits. It's still a little early to tell the total effect that the COVID pandemic has had on giving. I mean, we've seen the COVID year, we've seen the first year, we hope to say post-COVID, right, if the worst is over. But it may take another year minimum to see the real trends and if giving will go back to 2019 pre-COVID levels, or if there is a more lasting effect of the pandemic on giving and to those areas that they will give. Giving trends by gift size, classified micro all the way up to super size, and you can see by the average amount of gift, the year-over-year change is down in each group, but you can see that percent of total dollars, the major and super size, the two at the bottom, they make up a significant, about 75% of total giving. And those numbers are not down as much as the micro and the small. And this kind of mirrors what we just saw on giving by household income levels, where the lower are seeing more hurdles. Now, on to some reasons why there are obstacles for giving, especially for income levels that are lower and middle. And this is just a line graph of the US inflation rate from the beginning of 2020 till the end of 2022. And you can see how it's really risen from 2021 all the way to mid 2022, where it peaked at about 9%. Now you can see that the inflation rate is decreasing as we went from mid 2022 to current. It's currently at about 6%. Keep in mind, however, that 6.5%, 6% number is a year-over-year number. So when you go back a year from there and see the increases in November of 21, we're about 6.8%. You're still seeing pretty heavy inflation rate increases. Now, when you think about a family making $30,000 a year or a family making $60,000 a year, may very well have an impact on where they're going to give, how much they're going to give, and how frequently they're going to give, correct? Imagine a family that only allots $500 to charitable donations in a year. They may need to tighten that belt and limit it to $250 or maybe even $200. If they had habitually given to 3 or 4 charities, they may have to scale that back to 1 or 2 if they give at all. So that's one of the key hurdles and obstacles that you probably have been seeing your constituents mention, as far as any obstacles to giving at levels that they previously had. Now, job losses abound. We've all seen the headlines. Hopefully, no one in your family or your friends are seeing this, but it's happening in a lot of levels. It's happening across a number of different industries, technology. We've seen it seems every week a new headline comes out about Amazon downsizing, or Twitter, or some of those other technology companies, retail, hospitality, food service, more. People are starting to resume their post-COVID behavior. And a lot of the technology companies, especially when COVID first hit and everything got changed to virtual only, and people were basically on lockdown and not able to go into the workplace, everybody was relying on technology, right? Because everyone was at home, everyone was doing virtual. Well, these technology companies ramped up to prepare for that, and possibly expecting that trend to continue a little longer than it has. Well, now people are starting to go back to brick and mortar. They're starting to go back to the office. However, there's still about half the workforce has some kind of hybrid plan in their 40-hour work week. So online is still going to be very, very key. Virtual is going to be very key. And as you go back from virtual events in your United Way agencies, and maybe you start to integrate more in-person events in the last year or so, most agencies still have a virtual hybrid option for those who either don't feel comfortable being in person yet, or due to schedules and work schedules and commitments, can really only participate on a virtual hybrid level. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. This is the interactive part, one of 4 poll questions. We talked a little bit about the giving trends. in nonprofit world and in the nonprofit industry as a whole. We'd like to take your temperature of those who are on the call right now in this webinar and find out what your 2022 versus previous year giving trend looks like. If you know of it, there should be a poll that's popping up right now, and I'll give you about 60 to 80 seconds to put in your best guess for your agency.
And Greg, everybody answered fast, so we're good to end.
Well, how about that? You guys are on the ball. Well, there'll be some of those interactive parts to keep things interesting, and we always love to see your input. So what we will do is when we get done with this webinar, we will email you a link to the recording of this webinar as well as this presentation deck, so you can have it. Combine it with your notes, and it will also have the results of these polls so you can see some of your colleagues on this webinar and how they answered. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about COVID and going forward and how maybe that altered the plans of agencies such as yours. We did an extensive survey of our client base right after we hope, again, the worst of the COVID pandemic was over, and basically asked our constituents, excluding annual campaigns, how many fundraising activities does your organization execute in a typical non-COVID year? And you can see what the breakout was. Most do 1 to 2, but you do have some that do anywhere from 3 to 10 or a little bit more than that. When asked as the same part of the survey, if these agencies downscaled their number of fundraisers, most of them did. And really what they did are two things. Two of the trends that we saw were really two things. We saw that they scaled down the number of their initiatives and probably, cutting significantly their in-person ones, obviously, and maybe replacing them with virtual. But also really narrowing that peripheral vision and focusing on what critically was part of their core mission statement, right? You can see in the bottom part that 90% of the respondents in this survey focused on their core pillar activities. They're starting to get back to where they were before COVID, and that is increasing the number of their fundraising initiatives back to where they were before COVID. But again, it's a slow grow, right? As you probably have found in your agencies, to get back, because not everyone's positive right now if this trend that we're seeing is going to be the one that goes long term. We still have a little bit more of a sample size to go through to find out what the long-term effect is, and we hope that everything goes back to the way it was before and continues to increase. Now we get to the second polling question. How many fundraisers are you planning in 2023? Options should be popping up. I'll give you a little time, and Nikki can let us know if everybody got their answers in. And remember, these results are anonymous, so feel free to answer however you'd like. Your results will remain anonymous.
Sharing results for just a couple of seconds here.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki. Special thank you to our Vanna White today, Nikki, turning the letters.
Go ahead.
Okay. And a follow-up question. this is where it gets interesting and where your insight is very much appreciated, and will be interesting to see how your colleagues answer anonymously. What kind of initiatives are you planning? You can see there's several different options, from raffles and auctions and contests to in-person events to peer-to-peer and crowdfunding.
All right, we're going to go ahead and end the poll.
Okay.
And sharing the results for just a couple of minutes for our attendees.
Okay. Let me know when I'm okay to proceed.
And go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit right now. We gave you kind of a macro view of all the key macro, big picture 30,000 foot indicators of the nonprofit industry: total donations, number of households donating, by income level, by gift level, and areas of need. So now what we want to do is we want to zoom in on how the nonprofit industry has scored recently on donation conversions. And when we say that, we mean the percentage of potential donors that go to your Donate Now page, not just anywhere else on your website. They've done their research, they've done their reading, they click on your Donate Now page. And of that population, what percentage ends that visit with a donation? Okay. So we can see from this 2021 benchmark study that nonprofits average a 21% donation page conversion rate. Okay, overall, you can see how they're broken out by the buckets. A couple things that we wanted to point out right here: hunger and poverty. That's one of the bars that really juts, and you can see spikes. That probably goes without saying, especially lately. Hunger and poverty are two of the most critical needs in all of your trade areas and your areas of need. So it's no surprise that a lot of donors are going to react to that bucket, right? One that also pops is cultural, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, keep in mind, if you're thinking about the culture, when we say cultural, we mean museums and things like that. Their donations may involve e-commerce. We'll talk about that in a little bit. E-commerce, when you're purchasing goods and services, right, for your home or business or what have you. A lot of cultural purchases those donations can be integrated with goods purchases, right? If you're buying something material, some kind of good or some kind of service. There's also a lot of memberships that are involved in cultural donations. So you're looking at on the whole, a very engaged group. If they've already made the effort to have a membership with your cultural institution, you'll get a little more engagement out of them. But tickets to events and whether it be works of art, or whether it be experiences, or whether it be things like that are some of the things that will make that cultural spike. But regardless, when you take the whole pie of all of these and average them out, it comes out to a 21% donation page conversion rate. So that means 21% of the folks who go to your Donate Now page end that visit with a donation, meaning 80% do not donate. Okay. Now, that 21% number 6 years ago was only 17%. So it is increasing a little bit, which is encouraging. But when we talk a little bit about e-commerce, which we're going to in just a heartbeat here, we'll see how donation conversions in the nonprofit space compared to purchase conversions in the e-commerce space. Okay, well, obviously the first question we're probably all asking ourselves is, when 80% do not donate, why is that? Okay, and this is some recent learning from a study with a couple thousand consumers as to why online shoppers abandon their transaction, right? So you're going onto a site, you're looking to make a transaction. What are some of the reasons? And I won't filter all them through you. They can see them visually. The main ones, as you probably are aware, is, you know, a potential shopper maybe feels like they're being taken through too many pages to complete their transaction. Maybe they think that they're being asked too much information than what they feel they need to provide for that transaction. Number two, some of them are asked to create an account before they even complete their transaction, which may get them to bug out a little bit. All these different reasons. If you can imagine somebody who's been meaning to donate to your United Way agency, right? But they just haven't gotten around to it. Things have gotten in the way. They're at the tail end of their lunch hour and they've got about 4 or 5 minutes to donate. They think about donating to you. They go to your website, and if that process takes too long, is too clunky, is not clean enough to their satisfaction, they may get to the end of that 4-minute process without having completed. They need to get back to work, and they may say, you know, I'll do this again. And you hope they come back, but you never know if they'll come back. So the idea really is to make that as clean, crisp, concise as possible, asking for no more, no less information than you need, and make them feel very good about their transaction, right? Now, we talk about the e-commerce and retail space. How does the nonprofit industry compare to that? I will say that the top 50 websites worldwide are littered, as you're probably not surprised, with e-commerce sites. Amazon, Target, Apple, Walmart, all those different websites. I mean, you're probably thinking of many in your head right now in the last 7 days alone that you have probably patronized, looked, and or purchased. There are no nonprofit websites, as much as we would like there to be. None of the nonprofit websites are in that top 50 list. So there is something that e-commerce is doing correctly to give those customers a good, beneficial, impactful, engaging experience that we may be able to take some best practices from there and put to the nonprofit space. So we already talked about the 21% nonprofit conversion rate from the Donate Now page. E-commerce's conversion rate on their checkout page, their shopping cart page, is 49%. So that's 2.3 times higher than nonprofit. Obviously, leading that list, the behemoth, is Amazon. Amazon Prime's checkout completion rate, conversion rate, is about 74%. So 3 out of every 4 customers that get to the shopping cart page for Amazon Prime are going to convert to a purchase. Overall, Amazon's at about 55%. When you mix all of the top 100 e-commerce sites together, they're at 49%. So raise your hand, even though we can't see you. Raise your hand if you're in your seats and you'd like to have a donation conversion rate of 49% as opposed to the industry standard right now of 21%. I'm pretty sure everybody is raising their hand right now. So we definitely would love to see every nonprofit get to that rate and beyond, right? Now, I had mentioned that 21% you're seeing on the left, that nonprofit, in the last 6 years is 3% higher than it was in 2017. Likewise, the e-commerce rate was 32% in 2017. So that jumped 17%. So not only is the e-commerce completion rate higher, it is jumping at a more exponential rate than the nonprofit conversion rate is. So all these things are pointing to things e-commerce is doing right, and we'll talk about how that can affect your plans for nonprofits in a bit. We'll now go to the fourth and final poll question. How does your organization's conversion rate compare to the industry standard we've seen of 21% or the e-commerce rate of 49%? And we'll field those options right now.
Results are coming in. Give us a second.
No problem. You are all very on the ball. You're wonderful today.
All right, ending the poll.
Okay.
And let me share results for just a few seconds.
All right.
Go ahead.
Okay. So now we've talked about nonprofit space. We've talked about e-commerce. What can we in the nonprofit industry learn from e-commerce? Okay. Let's talk about e-commerce sites and why they get the conversion rates that they do, right? And you can follow along as I go through this and think about your own interactions with e-commerce sites that are in your everyday lives or your family's everyday lives, right? The e-commerce sites, chances are that you like the most and patronize the most, they educate you about the product that you're interested in. They tell you about it, right? They educate you on it. They inform you about it. They captivate you with those details. They captivate you. They inspire and motivate you to purchase what you are showing an interest in, right? Whether they're doing it by content, the way they read what they read, how things are designed, how things are presented from a design standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint, how they're taking you through that process, right? The story they are telling you. And then finally, they enable trust in you, that you know that you will be treated securely, you'll be treated well, you'll be treated as a valued customer by this e-commerce outlet, right? So those four things, think about those four things that e-commerce does. And now think about all the similarities to fundraising, that what you are selling, what you are marketing, surely, yes, it is different. But there's a benefit in what you are selling, just like there's a benefit in the goods and services that your favorite e-commerce sites are touting. So when you look at that, these 4 points, education, captivation, inspiration, and trust, is pretty similar to fundraising. Okay, now the key to successful online engagement, right? You pull all these things that we talked about, along with branding and categorization, and then this, what we call the 6 Ps: portfolio, the breadth of what you're offering, right? The category of what you're offering. And you can see when you look at the Zappos example to the right, you can see down the left margin, all the things that they offer, cleanly organized, cleanly categorized, so you can navigate pretty easily based on what you're looking for. If you're looking for women's wears, men's wears, kids, you can go down, you can easily find where you're going. And you look to the right and you can see imagery of the things that, you know, they believe that you'll be interested in seeing. That's the packaging and the presentation, personalization. When you go to your favorite e-commerce site and you make a purchase, how often do they come back at the end and say, we see that you like this, and they recommend other things that you might like? And you see it all the time when whether you're scouring Facebook or social media, you talk about something and all of a sudden that ad happens to pop up, right? They can see from that behavior that you're indicating an interest and are recommending additional options. These are things that not only can work in the e-commerce space, but if you turn it and you tweak it and bring that to your nonprofit space, they'll work just as well. The philosophies are all the same. You really want to tell your story. You want to tell it cleanly, concisely, convincingly, and you want to lead your customers along your journey. Talk about the impact of their assistance and their support of your organization and your mission, and then entice them to make the purchase. You can see here how another e-commerce brand, Home Depot, takes you from top to bottom in the shopping cart, right? They estimate shipping time. They give you clear product images. They basically put their shopper hats on and think of any kind of pitfall, any kind of hurdle, any kind of obstacle that could get in the way of a successful, impactful, inspiring experience with their website, and they take care of it before it even becomes an issue. This very same thing can be done with nonprofits. Okay, so putting e-commerce strengths to work for nonprofits. That's what we've been talking about, right? Taking the best tips, the best tricks, the best practices from e-commerce and putting it in the hands of your developers to make it work for you, right? It's branded, it's categorized, it's packaged. You can see very easily when you look at the table on the right-hand side, all the things that are available for you to support this particular museum, right? And to put in your shopping cart, and revisit it, go back if you want to add to it, and then check out. Couple interesting research points that I wanted to point out here, and this really speaks to the importance of having a branded donation page, right? Branded United Way for your agency and nothing more. Charity websites with a branded donation page, according to a Network for Good Digital Giving Index survey recently, receive 5 times more donations than a generic donation page that wasn't 100% branded, with the United Way URL, with the colors, with all of your branding, all of your treatments. In fact, in one study, an abandonment rate, again, the abandonment rate is the percentage of those folks that go to your Donate Now page that wind up abandoning without making a donation, went from 36% down to 1% after shifting from a PayPal to a branded transaction page. The other thing too is to make sure, one of the other critical things is that when you take your prospective donor through this process, right, that the United Way brand is the only one that's there. And if a third party brand doesn't make its way into a URL or into a form or what have you, whenever a potential donor sees that, their first instinct is, okay, now I see somebody else's URL. Now they're not sure if 100% of the donation is going United Way. Is this other name taking a couple percentage points on a commission or what have you? So you want to make sure that not only are you branded 100%, but you want to make sure that you keep it, your United Way brand. Another thing to think about for some of you, obviously workplace giving and individual and recurring giving are critical to your United Way agencies, but it's not the only way that your donors can give, right? They can give either time, talent, or treasure. So you wanna try to make sure that your online engagement platform can handle any ask, not just financial. So if it is a volunteer event, whether there is an auction or a raffle or a contest or something like that involved with it, but also volunteer slots, right? If you're doing an event and you've got, let's say, 5 different buckets that you need volunteers for, someone to operate the parking lot, someone to sell tickets to the food and the beverages, some people to man certain booths. You maybe look for a platform where that all can be handled online. So that saves your staff a significant amount of man hours, not having to keep an Excel spreadsheet or to keep a piece of paper, finding out how many people have volunteered for duty A and how many spots are left for duty A. Because that kind of thing can be taken care of on your online engagement platform. Not only brand consistent on your desktop website, but also brand consistent and functional across any device. Of total web traffic from a March 2022 survey, this is United States numbers only, probably not a surprise to you, 6 out of 10 instances of web traffic is happening on a mobile phone. 36% are using desktop, 3% are using the tablet. So you want to make sure that whatever device your potential donor is seeing your message, seeing your campaign, seeing your ask, looks good, is functional, that they can see everything on the screen no matter how wide it is, narrow being mobile, mid-range being tablet, wide being desktop. Knowing how people consume their content in such a different way now. Even extends to auctions, peer-to-peer, and crowdfunding, in case any of you get into any of these things, peer-to-peer and crowdfunding. Even these spaces have been taking advantage of and leveraging these practices that we've talked about in the e-commerce space, right? To again, no matter what kind of fundraising initiative you're doing, it stands to reason that everyone you want to be a clean, concise, impactful, positive experience for your potential donor. Talking about keeping your impact at the forefront, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. You always want to make sure that you keep your impact at the forefront. Your donors are not giving their money to you. They're giving money to an impact to help your mission simply by way of you, right? You're simply the middle, you're the middle folks. You're the ones who put that money to good to make that mission happen and create that impact for the constituents that you serve. So always communicate whenever possible, and making sure that your elevator speech, that your slogan, that your catchphrase, everything talks about your impact, right? A food bank impact, very, very simple. A lot of food banks use it. Every dollar equals 4 meals. Every dollar equals 4 meals. Everything they say from a marketing and fundraising standpoint says every dollar equals 4 meals. Very similar in your United Way speaking. You're probably very familiar with this. X amount of dollars means one night of shelter for a person who otherwise would be homeless, if you think of it in that language, right? And what that does is that talks to people who may only be able to give $10 at this time. And they're probably thinking, well, $10 really isn't going to help much. What's that going to do? Well, clearly communicating your impact is going to do exactly that. It's going to say, even though it's $10, your $10 is going to go to this much. You're going to be able to make a difference with this $10 and quantify that, right? When you talk about your annual campaign, for instance, to exterior populations, everybody outside of United Way, think about renaming that annual campaign to something that is donor centric, right? I mean, annual campaign is kind of the way we speak in nonprofit world. If you're talking to the average donor, they may not know what annual campaign means. If you focus that and name it after an impact statement, right? A feed the homeless campaign, or provide a night of shelter campaign, something like that to show how it's being used. You'll be able to optimize your donations. And some of your organizations may have a special historical name, historical date, an affinity name that you can name that after, right? You can name your campaign, your fund, your initiative after a significant founding date or individual that a donor would recognize, right? If somebody that's big in your trade area and the community that you serve, that might be something to look at. But again, if you take anything away from this, it's just always impact, 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 and make sure you're always talking about how your impact comes to the forefront. And then sharing on social media, one tip is that you can offer and invite your donor, once you've got them locked in, they've made a donation, to share in a social media with a simple button. Facebook, if you click the Facebook icon right there, they can have a message automatically populate, pre-written by you, so you can kind of control that message and make sure that the most accurate message is getting out there, that they can share it with their Facebook friends, and thereby using that spider web, if you will, to get your message out exponentially. Okay, now quickly we want to go into some of the pros and cons of single page versus catalog. And before we do this, let's define what single page and catalog is. Single page is similar to something like Eventbrite, for those of you that use Eventbrite. Eventbrite is a website where they typically do singular events, whether they be telethons or walks or runs or fundraisers of that nature, singular events. That's where all the information and all the fields they ask to fill out, that you would ask a potential donor to fill out, is typically on a single page. as opposed to catalog. So we go back to e-commerce, Amazon. Those of you, I'm sure, very familiar with Amazon, where lots of different things come up. You choose, cell phones or something like that, and you'll have lots of different options at your disposal right there, and you can kind of look over that category, and you can see in a multi-page what's available, right? So what I want to do is take you through real briefly about the pros and the cons of each. And really what you want to do, what's really going to dictate whether you go single page or catalog with your forms is really what you're trying to accomplish, how many different initiatives that you are touting and selling at one time here, and then also your audience, right? Who you're talking to. So keep an eye as we go through this. You may find that certain initiatives may be more apt to use single page for your uses and others multiple pages or catalogs, right? So some of the pros for single page, again, there's the same number of form fields. There's no waiting for the page to refresh at each step because there's only one page, right? Progress, the user can see, the potential donor can see the status within the checkout process. Since everything's on one page, they can see when they're 25% of the way through, 50, 75% of the way through. Navigation, all fields on one page. There's no need to go back in the browser to refresh. Not as much of a chance to, that some users may get lost or caught up in there. One of the cons from single page could be layout. Depending on how much information you've got in that single page, it may look cluttered. It all depends on the number of form fields that you have and the information that you do need to glean from your potential donor, because this is all consolidated and taken into one page, right? Pros for catalog. You can collect donor data if they filled out earlier pages, but then they abandon it before they complete it. For example, let's say there are 3 pages in this multiple page catalog scenario. They've gotten to 2 pages and something called them away. It might have been one of those things in that bar graph or what have you, but they filled out some valuable information for you on those first 2 pages, but they ultimately didn't complete the 3rd page, which means they didn't complete the transaction. Well, in this scenario, you can still collect that data that they filled out in the first 2 pages, even though they didn't fill out that 3rd. Not only that, but you can see where a donor dropped out. So under that same scenario, you can see that maybe there was something on page 3 that maybe served as a hurdle or an obstacle to them. It may just be a one-off. It may just be something by chance. But if you keep finding out as you go through that you're getting multiple prospective donors that are dropping out at the same question, the same field, around the same place, that might be a sign that, maybe to focus on that page, that part of the catalog to maybe refine and optimize. Layout, cleaner checkout is one pro from a catalog. Again, not all the fields are on one page, so you can categorize them a little bit as you take your prospective donor through their journey from page 1 to page 2 to page 3, meaning each page taken by itself is easier to fill out. One of the cons, complexity can be a con. Again, if they see that there's 3 or 4 pages in that process, they may feel it's a little more labor intensive, but it still may be necessary, again, depending on your audience and depending on how many initiatives you are trying to communicate in your content at that given time, right? Okay, we're almost done here, I think. So we've talked a little bit about what to look for in the e-commerce engagement space, and you all can do that from mining your own particular e-commerce experiences. And you think about the things that you can bring to your donation, to your nonprofit's Donate Now page. Talking about making impact at the forefront, making sure that it motivates and engages and excites the person to make a purchase. Knowing, making sure as we go back to this page to know that you're using the best form for your needs and for your goals, whether it be single page or catalog. These are all things you want to look for in your online engagement platform. These are the things that in our online engagement platform we think about every day to make sure we put our donor hat on and head off any potential pitfall that we possibly can before it even happens, to make sure that that experience is the most insightful, amazing, impactful, positive, great experience and motivating experience for any donor that comes for one of our nonprofits websites. So we leave you with that. If there's any questions that you do have, well, I did want to show you just a few shots of some work that we've done for various United Way agencies across the country from many different standpoints, from workplace giving to individual recurring giving, to events, auctions, galas, catalogs, cutest pet contests. I don't know if any of you have done cutest pet contests, but they've become kind of all the rage. Nobody loves them. Nobody. They only love kids more than they love pets, right? Everybody loves their pets, and it really it brings out a lot of the fun in people when they nominate their pet for cutest pet contest, and really does a real good job for donating for the cause using a very creative means, right? If you have a specific topic or question that we didn't cover today, my email address is right there. Feel free to reach out. And what we'll do with any questions you have, we'll send an answer to the group that got together on this webinar with some answers to some of the most common questions that you did have. As I mentioned before, we will send you a link to a recording of this webinar, a copy of this presentation that you did see. We hope that you found it useful. We know that your time is valuable, and we thank you for joining us for 30-35 minutes out of your busy day. And we know we've got a couple different time zones here of United Way folk, United Way colleagues. We hope that you found some of these things insightful and maybe walked away with a few ahas. And at this point, we will go ahead and get you back to your day. We want to thank everybody for your time today, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you. We'll be ending this. Have a good day, everybody.